Ani, welcome to the first installment of the Ribbon Skirt Chronicles. This will be a long-standing series on everything you need to know about making ribbon skirts, as well as different styles of ribbon skirts, different ways of making ribbon skirts, all of the above. All of the Ribbon Skirt Chronicle videos will be placed in a playlist, and I'll go ahead and link that down below. So today, in this video, as you can tell from the title, we're going to be talking about measuring and drafting your ribbon skirt. This video will be more than learning about how to take measurements on your body, but I'm also going to be talking about taking those measurements and translating them into drafting your ribbon skirt. There will be some key pieces of information that you'll need to know. So the agenda for today's video is how to measure your waist, how to measure your waistband, how to measure the length of your skirt, how to measure the hem, how to take those measurements and turn them into something that you can cut out, because that can be a little tricky and specific to each person, where to add seam allowance, and how to get that pattern onto your fabric. So now that the intro is out of the way, I hope it's okay that I put on my glasses because I can't see. Apologies if you hate the glare. So the one measurement for ribbon skirts that definitely seems to be different for a lot of people would be the waist measurements. Our bodies are all varying sizes, and the waist seems to be the most varied out of everybody. Thankfully with ribbon skirts though, ribbon skirts are very forgiving and in that area because the elastic is stretchy, so there's no getting measurements down to the millimeter to get it right. There's a lot of wiggle room with ribbon skirts. So to take your waist measurement, taking measurement tape, you can wrap it around your waist. One thing I do want to note, however, is to make sure you're taking that measurement where you intend to wear the elastic part of your skirt. Some people like to wear it more high-waisted, some, more low-waisted, maybe somewhere in between. And that's just because, especially for those who have more of an hourglass shape. I don't really have much of an hourglass shape. I'm rather more straight. But like say you do have an hourglass shape and you want to wear your ribbon skirt high-waisted, but then you take your measurement down closer to your hips, you can end up taking a measurement that is bigger than your waist. And vice versa. If you plan to wear your ribbon skirt down at your hips and you take your measurement higher on your waist, you could result in a skirt that is cut smaller than your hips. I can't even get the measurement tape to go down. And like I said before, with ribbon skirts, it's so forgiving that you don't really need to get a measurement down to the millimeter. So if you do make a mistake like that, I'm sure your skirt is going to come out fine and still wearable, especially because we cut the fabric to be much wider than our waist. But I just want to make that note because I don't want you to end up with a skirt that looks different than what you envisioned. You should be able to get the product that you're looking for. So yeah, wrapping your measuring tape around your waist. I like to wear my ribbon skirts up high at the point at where my waist bends. So if I hold my fingers where you can kind of see the bend of my waist, that's where I like to wear my ribbon skirts. And let's see, my measurement is 38. But if we cut it out to be, our exact measurement, then we're going to end up with a skin tight skirt. And we wouldn't even be able to get it over our hips actually. So what we want to do is we want to add a great deal more. In the original video, I did do sort of an equation. I've since learned that equation is a little intense for some people. I'm going to write it out here and in the description box if you are interested in using the equation. But since then, I've sort of come up with a foolproof rule for an easy way for how much of the skirt you should cut out based on your waist size. So for adults and for teenagers, I like to say adding about 20 inches to your waist measurement. For children, I like to say about 10 inches. And if you're making something for a baby, I'd say 5 inches. If you add any more than that, then you're going to end up with a really bulky skirt on a tiny little human. Of course, if you want a skirt that is really super duper flowy or is much more gathered than that, you could add more than the 20 or 10 inches. Those are just my suggestions. So once you get your waist measurement plus 20, that will be your measurement all the way around your skirt. Now we want to make a skirt using 2 panels. So in order to figure out how wide to cut each panel, you'll just want to take that new measurement you have, your waist measurement plus 20, and divide that by 2. That is how wide each of your panels will be. Measuring your waistband is a little more particular than measuring the waist for cutting your fabric out, but it's still easy nonetheless. What you want to do is wrap the elastic around your waist, and then don't stretch it when we do this part. You don't want to stretch the elastic and then wrap it around. You want to just not stretch it at all and let it be flush with your body. And then we want to leave a gap of about 5 inches and then cut the remainder off. So yeah, I'm not going to cut this one because I'm not making anything with it right now. I don't want to be wasteful, but let's say I cut the waist elastic right here. The 2 ends of my elastic should be about 5 inches apart. That way, when we put it in the skirt, then it can stretch and hold the skirt onto our body. If we were to cut the waistband to be our exact size, then there isn't enough tension really to hold the skirt to our body. And we don't want it to be too short that we're creating a corset. An alternative way to measure the waistband, especially if you're making this for somebody else and you're not around them to be able to wrap it around their body, is you can take their actual waist measurement. In my case, it was 38, and you can subtract about 5 inches for that. So if I wanted to do that with my 38-inch waist, then I would take this waistband and measure out 33 inches and then cut from there. Now the next measurement we're going to talk about is the length of your skirt, and that has 2 factors that belong to it. One is your actual measurement, the length of your body, and the second is up to your preference. Ribbon skirts are typically never worn above the knee. If they do, that's more of like a couture fashion, not to be worn to the round dance or powwow kind of thing. Mostly they are anywhere from below the knee to hitting the floor and everywhere in between. I personally like my ribbon skirts to end about mid-calf. A lot of people really like them to end around the ankles and feet. And like I said, you can just kind of end up anywhere in between the bottom of the knees and the floor. So to start taking this measurement, the very first thing I like to say is, do you remember when we took your waist measurement? That is because when we took our waist measurement, I wanted you to take that measurement where you intend for your waistband to sit. Being that that's where your waistband is going to sit, that's going to also be the top of your skirt. And we want to measure the length of your skirt from where that top is. So the point at which I took my measurement was right here. And if I took this measurement any higher or lower, that can result in the skirt not being the length that I was looking for. Now, when you have somebody with you, that is the easiest way to take this measurement. But in case you don't, what I like to do is take it from one of my legs. So I'm just moving my measuring tape over to the side, parallel with one of my legs. And then I like to run my hand along the tape until I can no longer reach anymore without bending my body. You don't want to bend your body at all at this point. So once I do that, then I'm going to hold this hand in place. And that's going to hold this measurement tape in place and keep it from shifting up or down. And then I'm going to let go with this hand and then bend over, making sure that this measuring tape in my hand does not move. Then what I'll do is I will take this hand that is now free, and I will again run the measuring tape down until I can't reach anymore. Now that we're down in this area, this is where you decide where your skirt is going to end. Like I said, most end, this is my knee right here. Most end right below those, anywhere from those to the floor. I like to wear mine about mid-calf, so that is like right here. And if I choose that spot, then my measurement is 29 inches. If you are looking for your skirt to be any shorter than that, like up to your knee, then obviously you don't have to measure down as far. But if you are looking for your skirt to be longer, say towards your ankles or the floor, you can just employ that same trick that I showed you, where you hold the measuring tape with one hand and then you smooth the measuring tape with the other until you get to where you're reaching for. So to make a ribbon skirt down to the floor, for me, that measurement is 43 inches. With these platforms anyways. But the final measurement that we need in the beginning of constructing a ribbon skirt is actually not a measurement to your body at all. This final measurement is the hem of your skirt. The hem of the skirt is the piece of the ribbon skirt making process that I feel like trips up my students the most, and that's because it just simply involves decision making over actually taking measurements. I do want to note that whatever measurement you decide on, it might change in the future relative to your waist, and I'll explain what that means when we get there. But most of the time, it is just deciding if you want a more straight or boxy skirt, a more flowy or A-line skirt, or like an extra flowy skirt that has a lot of fabric to move. So if you are looking for a more straight or boxy shape to your skirt, for an adult, I generally say about 50 inches around is the lowest you want to go for that. Any lower than 50 inches for a hem, then that might not be wide enough for your legs to be able to move and for you to walk. The next style of skirt I like to call an A-line skirt. It's a little flowy, but not very flowy. The one that you're seeing me wear has a 70-inch hem. You could get away with about a 60 or 65-inch hem and still get that same effect. And the final style is an extra flowy skirt. The one you're seeing here has about 86 inches of skirt to it here. And as you can see, it has a lot of movement, a lot of flow. If you like the style, then about the 86 inch to 90 inches is how much skirt you'll need for this style. Now, similar to that waist measurement that we did before, where we took our waist measurement and then we split that in half to find how wide we will cut the panels, we need to do the same thing for the hem. So if you chose a 50-inch hem, you'll want to divide that in two, and you know that you need to cut your hem to be at least 25 inches. For the 70-inch hem, you would cut the width of your fabric to be 35 inches. And for the extra flowy hem, you divide that 86 inches in half, and that was cut to be 43 inches wide, each panel. And that way, when you sew the two panels of the skirt together all the way around, that will produce the 50, 70, 86. So now we have all of our measurements. We have our waist measurement, we have our length measurement, we have our hem, and we can take that waistband and we can set it to the side for later. What do we do with those three measurements to turn them into a skirt? Well, sometimes that comes with a little bit of troubleshooting. Generally, when we're cutting out ribbon skirts, we're going to end up cutting our panels into one of two different shapes. You might cut your ribbon skirt into the shape of a rectangle, or you might cut it into the shape of a trapezoid. Whichever shape you end up cutting yours into, it really depends on what type of hem you're looking for and what waist measurement you have. For instance, if you want a 70-inch hem and your waist measurement is like 34 inches, you're going to end up cutting your skirt into a trapezoid. Now let's say you wanted a 70-inch hem and you have a 50-inch waist. Now keep in mind we added 20 inches to that. That brings it up to 70. So you would end up cutting your skirt to be a rectangle shape because you have the same waist measurement as the hem. When we cut the skirts into the rectangular shapes versus the trapezoid, they still end up with that trapezoid shape when we wear them though, because the elastic band cinches the waist to our body. Now, where the troubleshooting comes in, I can think of two examples off the top of my head right now, and that is when your waist measurement plus the 20 inches is wider than the hem you're looking for, or when your waist measurement is incredibly close to the hem that you're looking for. So for example, let's say that your waist measurement is 50 and you add 20 to that, bringing up the panel width to be 70. But you want a more boxy shape to your skirt, so you chose to have your hem be either 50 or 60. That would result in your waist being wider than the hem. So what I always tell my students, and what I'm telling you, is you would want to take your waist measurement down and match it to the measurement of the hem. Now, let's say you want a 70-inch waist and your waist is 45. Adding 20 to that gives you a 65-inch waist and a 70-inch hem. You can go ahead and cut a trapezoid. I personally think that it is just more simple to cut out a rectangle, and so you might as well just round that waist measurement up to match the hem. So instead of cutting the panel for your waist to be 65 inches around, I would round up to 70 and cut a rectangle where it's 70 at the waist, 70 at the hem. And the opposite goes for if your waist is wildly different from the hem that you're looking for. If you have, say, a 35-inch waist and you're looking for an 86-inch hem or even a 70-inch hem, I wouldn't suggest raising the width of your waist to cut a rectangle. That is up to you. That is possible. You can do that. What would happen in that case is your skirt would have quite a bit of extra fabric at the waist, and it would be just bulkier and more gathered. But if you like that look, then by all means cut the rectangle. But cutting the trapezoid just reduces the amount of bulk and gather in the waist. Hi, Editing Chelsea here. I didn't conclude everything that I was saying just to simplify it all, but basically, if your waist measurement is much different from your hem, then you'll end up cutting a trapezoid. But if your waist measurement is pretty close to your hem, whether it's a little bit more or it's a little bit less, then I suggest rounding that waist measurement to be the same size as your hem and thus cutting a rectangle. Okay, so now you have troubleshooted all of the nuances that comes to translating your measurements to what you're actually going to cut out. And one more thing you do before you take the measuring tape to the fabric is you're going to add your seam allowance. Typically, I don't really instruct my students to add seam allowance to their waist or their hem widths. And that's just because, as I keep saying in this video, ribbon skirts are very forgiving. The elastic does most of the work, and even the elastic has a range of sizes that it can fit. So I don't typically say add seam allowance to your waist or your hem. You can if you like. I instruct students to sew with a 1/2-inch seam allowance. So since there is a right side and a left side seam, that is 2 seams. 2 times 1/2 inch is 1 inch. So if you are really worried about having your hem be exactly 70 inches, then I would cut the seam allowance an extra inch. The only thing about that, though, that I really want to note is you add that inch after you have divided your measurement in half. Where adding seam allowance is rather particular and less forgiving in a ribbon skirt is the length. We are adding seam allowance at the length at 2 different places. One is the waist area. This allowance gives more fabric to put in the waistband. And 2 is the hem allowance. This extra fabric allows you to fold the fabric upwards and finish off the hem. How much waistband allowance you add to the length of your skirt can vary depending on how wide of elastic waistband you have. Here I have 1.5-inch waistband. So this is kind of typical. A lot of people use this waistband width. So I like to instruct students to add 3 inches to the top of their skirt. If you have a much smaller waistband, I don't typically see people use much smaller. The smallest I see people go is an inch wide. So if you have an inch wide waistband, I would say add 2 inches. Basically, double the size of your waistband. You know, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1.5 plus 1.5 is 3. So you should be able to figure out the amount that you want to add based on what waistband you have. As for adding seam allowance for the hem, or otherwise known as hem allowance, I typically like to say to add an inch. If you really want to be particular, you can add either a 1/2 inch or a full 1 inch depending on what type of hem you plan on doing. There's 2 different hems I like to show people. One is folding a 1/2 inch of the fabric up at the bottom and then just sewing it. The other is where you do a rolled hem. That is where you fold a 1/2 inch of the fabric edge up and then you fold another 1/2 inch over again. But typically I just tell my students to add 1 inch no matter what they're doing. I just feel like that gives them a lot of wiggle room, especially for beginners. So let's relate this to me as well. My length measurement was 29. There's no dividing this in half or anything like that. That's just the length of your body. All we're going to do with that measurement is we're going to add the waistband allowance and the hem allowance. So for my 1.5 inch wide waistband, I'm going to add 3 inches. So that takes the 29 up to 32. Next, I want to add 1 inch for the hem allowance. So that is going to take the 32 up to 33. But how exactly do you map that out on actual fabric? Well, I'm going to show you right now. I hope this is a helpful method, but I have here some small pieces of fabric that I'm going to cut basically a way scaled down version of a ribbon skirt so that you can really see the full picture. So a quick note before we get to that is I just want to talk about how you lay out the fabric before drafting and cutting it. And I have a life-size piece of fabric to show you that with. So this is a piece of fabric that came off of a bolt, you know, like the bolts that you would find at like a fabric store, RIP Joann's. And it's often not wide enough to accommodate our measurements that we need for a skirt. So what I tell everybody to do is to unfold the fabric and then fold it in half the other way. And then that produces a piece of fabric that is wide enough for your waist and hem measurements and long enough for the length of your skirt. And then with this folded in half, you have 2 layers here. So you would lay both of them onto the table and draft your pattern onto the fabric and cut it out so that you are only measuring once and cutting once, but producing 2 pieces, a front piece and a back piece. So first I want to show you how to cut out a ribbon skirt if you are needing to cut your panels in a rectangular shape. We're going to start with the rectangle first because in order to do a trapezoid, we start with some of the same steps, but there are a few more steps involved. So again, this is way scaled down. So for this ribbon skirt, we're going to cut a 9-inch waist, a 9-inch hem, and the skirt is going to be 10 inches long. The first thing I always like to do is making sure I'm starting with a nice and straight edge. I like to find the hem first. So again, the hem is 9 inches long. So starting from the edge of the fabric, I'm going to measure 9 inches and then I will mark that. We don't want to then find the waist yet because I don't know how far up or down I need to find that waist measurement. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the length. The length is 10 inches and I like to find it from both the mark that I just made and from the point where I first started. So I'm going to measure from here 10 inches. And I'm going to measure from here 10 inches. And then I also like to measure a couple times again in the middle of the skirt. so that I'm able to make sure that I have a nice straight line going across. Okay, now we found the hem and we've also found the length. Now I know where I need to find the waist. So it needs to be along this line here. The waist is 9 inches. So I'm going to now measure at where the length is and make that mark. Measuring in the corner of the fabric, we don't have to cut along right here or right here. So all I need to do now is make a line connecting these points and then cut that out. And then here we go. This is a rectangular shaped skirt. Or no, that was the hem. It's the same either way, but you have the hem, the waist, and the length. And then once you put the elastic band in, then this scrunches up and turns into a skirt. All right, now let's work on a trapezoid shape. Again, this is if your waist measurement is smaller than the hem measurement. Just like before with the rectangle skirt, I'm going to find the hem first. So working with the same hem, I'm going to find that 9 inches. And again, just like the rectangle, I'm going to find the length next. So that is going to be 10 inches. I'm working with the same length as well. Now this is where it gets different. For the rectangle, we just found the waist again. It was the same as the hem, but in this case, the waist is smaller than the hem. We're going to work with a 6-inch waist as compared to the 9-inch hem. And unlike the rectangle, we wouldn't just find the 6-inch waist the same, because that is going to result in the waist not being centered with the hem. What we want to do is to make sure that the 6 inches is perfectly centered with the 9 inches in order to make the trapezoid. So in order to do that, we just need to do a little bit more math, and it requires dividing in half again. So being that the hem is 9 inches, what we need to do is divide that in half. That is 4.5. After we do that, then we're going to measure and find that 4.5 mark. Then we're going to also find that 4.5 mark at the top. What we have found is the center of the skirt. Next, we want to take the waist measurement, which is 6, and divide that in half, and that would be 3. The only thing is we're not going to find the 3 inches from the edge of the fabric. Instead, we're going to find that 3 inches from the center of the fabric. So I am going to place this here, and we're going to measure it 1, 2, 3 inches this way, and 1, 2, 3 inches this way. These are the edges of your waist. The next thing we do then is we're going to connect the end of the waist to the end of the hem, which is much easier just to do in this small scale. You might need to line up a couple of these to do it on your actual skirt. Again, we're going to connect the edge of the waist to the edge of the hem, which is right there. I'm going to go ahead and also draw a line at the waist. And there is our trapezoid. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So here is the trapezoid that we made. This is the waist, this is the hem. And now to relate it to myself, just to really help you understand, in case scaling it down made it a little confusing, my waist was 38 inches, and with all of the figuring, the adding 20, dividing in half, and all that, I would cut my waist to be 24 inches across. For a 70-inch waist, then I would cut it to be 35 inches across. So what I do first is I find half of 35, which is 17 and a half. Measuring from the edge of the fabric, I'm going to find 17 and a half inches here and 17 and a half inches here. And now I have found the center of the skirt. Next, I need to take my waist and divide that in half. So my waist being 24 inches across, divided in half is 12. Starting at the center point, I'm going to measure 12 inches this way and 12 inches that way. Then I would mark these 2 points and connect them to the ends of the hem. And when you do that, you end up with a lovely trapezoid, and the elastic band will then cinch it up and make you a skirt. I do want to note that in some cases you might end up with a more square shape than a rectangle shape, and that is sometimes the case with more petite people, with more short people, and that's totally okay. You would follow the same exact steps for the rectangle. You'd follow, or you'd find the hem, the length, and then the waist, and it would cut out a square for you. And in the end, once we have our elastic band, then we have our skirts. So I hope that was helpful for you. I apologize for the audio right now and towards the end of that filming because I accidentally cut my microphone cord. Fun stuff. Again, all of the other videos will be linked in the playlist down below. What I can say right now is next I'm going to be talking about how to apply the ribbons, how to put the skirt together and inserting the waistband and doing the hem. I do already have an applique video existing, but I'll go ahead and include that in the playlist as well. That video can be in multiple playlists. And then in the future, I want to add things to this Chronicles series, such as how to make drop waist skirts, how to make paper bag skirts. Those are just 2 ideas that I have floating in my head right now. We'll certainly be adding more in the future though. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you on the next one. Bama Peak Wapman.